Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
Keep ripping that paper there, Rick. What's going on over there?
No, I had too many papers. I had to get rid of them, so I threw it over there.
That's what breaks are for.
Yeah.
All of today's guests on this final day of our show, before we take our summer break, brought to you by the Vancouver Giants. That includes Thomas Drance, standing by. Check out first-round pick Samuel Honzek and the Giants at the LEC when they kick off next season on September 22nd versus Victoria. Of course, Samuel drafted by...
You got it. Flames, Calgary Flames. Okay. Hey, hold it a second. The Flames drafted two Giants, Lipinski too, a big kid. 6'4".
Well, there you go.
So that's why
it's easy to get confused.
Yeah, but Honzek is going to be a good one. And don't forget Lipinski. He's going to be a good one too.
Okay, good tap dancing there.
Yeah. Anyways,
come back to ripping your paper. Get your season tickets for next year now at VancouverGiants.com/season tickets. Thomas Drance knows all about Samuel Honzek. He joins us now from The Athletic. He was out at UBC yesterday for the development camp scrimmage. Thomas, thanks for doing this, sir. How are you?
My pleasure, gentlemen. My last hit of the year. Just want to thank you guys for having me. I have a blast chatting with you every week. So thank you. Looking forward to doing it one more time, and looking forward to watching Rick huck stationary around like some latter-day Dave Hodge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, Dave Hodge. Remember this? Hold on a sec.
Yeah, you know what happened to Dave after he did that?
He got fired.
Watch out, buddy.
He got fired.
Okay. Okay, development camp, scrimmage. Last night, what or who stood out?
Lots of players did. Donnie, for me, Elias Pettersson was honestly, for me, throughout the week, what I saw, because, of course, I was stuck in Nashville and missed the very first day of practices. But from what I saw across two practice sessions and the scrimmage, he's sort of the guy who most opened my eyes in terms of what he's capable of. You know, we knew or have heard a lot about the physicality, the defense. That's all there. What I hadn't realized was his mobility is really solid. Like, there are absolutely no questions for me that his wheels are pro level today as a 19-year-old. And his skill level, I think his skill level and body control is certainly a lot better than it's been advertised as, right? A lot of people have talked about this player as a guy with limited upside. But when you look at what he did at the J20 level last year, where it was plus point per game, and how often and regularly he played for a Rebro in the SHL, you know, maybe I shouldn't have been so surprised, but I thought his puck handling was really good. And then there was just small things, like there's an authority to the way he defended. Even in a scrambly development camp scrimmage environment, you could hear him constantly calling for passes when he was the best option. And late in the game, he's on the bench. His team is threatening in a 2-2 tie as the clock winds down, and he's standing on the bench yelling at the refs at Dev Camp, appealing for a penalty to get his team a penalty shot. You know, there's something about a guy who's that competitive, even in a relatively informal environment, that you know, you can't help but sort of admire, root for. So he was the guy who stood out most to me, to be totally honest, in terms of opening my eyes to the quality of prospect that the Canucks may have on their hands in, you know, their 2022 third-round pick.
And he's got himself a 3-year entry-level contract, Thomas. What's in store for him next season? This coming
sounds like he's going back to Sweden, and that's totally fine. You know, it's not like he looked uncomfortable playing on the North American ice, and you know, I think it's probably a good thing given that he was an SHL regular last year, given that Jonathan Lekkerimäki has now gone over to that team as well. You know, I sort of watch to see, can this guy in his draft +2 in a pretty tough men's professional league at the senior level in Sweden sort of carve out a top 4 role for himself? I think that would represent meaningful progress, as meaningful as anything he could accomplish, frankly, in the American League. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he looks like in this space next year. But that's a player with perhaps a more promising future than we've been than we've given him credit for. Then I think we sort of need to raise the bar on the way we're discussing this player.
Thomas, what did you think of the first-round pick, Tom Willander?
Yeah, and he's an 18-year-old player, Rick, and he's only played 3 games at the senior level in Sweden, right? 1 in the Allsvenskan, 2 in the SHL. And this is a very odd evaluative environment, right? Like, we're talking about an environment where, you combine a guy like Willander, who's fresh off the draft floor, 18, not a ton of experience at the senior level, with a guy like Akito Hirose, who's 24 and has played meaningful NHL games, with a guy like Jack Randall, who's, a 23-year-old who's played 4 years at the NCAA level, including 120 plus NHL games, NCAA games, excuse me. So, I didn't think it was his best night, but that's okay. You could see it. You could see why he was the 11th overall pick in flashes, moving left to right from behind the net, beating the forecheck. He had one sequence where, he ate a hit from Lucas Forsell, kept going, managed to key the rush. He had another where he used the threat of his speed and just sort of started looking around using his eyes, and that alone backed off some forechecking forwards. You like to see that stuff. And then he had a 3-on-3 shift where he walked the line, and you can see the mobility, you can see the crossovers. I'd say puck skills at this point are at a level where I'd probably describe them as workable. That would be sort of the area that I think he's going to need to target for improvement most. But I thought you could see why the Canucks were so high on him. You could see why he fits the template of a contemporary NHL defensive defender going forward.
Thomas, I don't think the Canucks are done here. I think they're still working the phones, trying to clear some cap space. There's still a lot of time here, Thomas, to get to move around, clear some cap space, add some new bodies before training camp in your eyes?
Well, sure. I think the limitation here, Rick, is they have 46 NHL contracts, and Niels Höglander has been qualified, so he's 47, even if he doesn't show up yet on your capfriendly.com page. Now, Kirill Kudryavtsev can slide, so that sort of brings them back to 46, but I don't know that you could really add more than 2 bodies here between now and training camp. You might be able to send a contract out in a trade. Maybe you lose a guy on waivers. Maybe you have an injury later, but you've got to preserve some flexibility so that you're ready to do that, right? And honestly, so that you're ready to be surprised. I mean, you don't want to be at training camp pressed up against the 50 contract limit and some guy comes out of nowhere, right? And you can't even keep him. You got to send him back to Europe or the CHL because you don't have contract space. Like you can't be in that position. So I think the Canucks are pretty prescribed in terms of what they can do yet, or like over the next couple months. I think 2 bodies maybe they could add. I'd sort of look for a depth forward or 2, someone in that Sheldon Dries tier, because I do think it's pretty thin right now up front. I know we're so used to thinking they've got a ton of depth on the wings, but you sustain an injury or 2 and you're very quickly into the, Danila Klimovich, Linus Karlsson, Arshdeep Bains tier of player where, if you're using them to replace a guy who's hurt at the NHL level and playing them 4th line minutes, you're also hurting their development, right? So finding a guy, a tweener type or 2, to me would be a priority. There's also some names left that are pretty intriguing in terms of value bets. I mean, we know that they've at least had some passing interest in Philip Zadina, who looks like he's getting terminated. Pius Suter's still out there, and he's a guy that Alvin and Rutherford certainly talked to when he was first coming out of Europe over to the NHL a few years back. He's probably a more credible top 9 center option, and maybe now that he's sort of missed the free agent frenzy boat, is available on a bargain contract. I think there's still opportunities to do a few things, to explore and kick tires on some guys to flesh out the depth of this roster a bit further. But in terms of moving money, we just haven't seen it done. Like, we haven't seen teams be willing to pay the freight required to move off inefficient contracts all summer. I think it's why this NHL offseason has been so weird, so bizarre in terms of how it's played out, so slow, stodgy, dull. And I wouldn't expect the Canucks to suddenly, sort of come to Jesus, as it were, and decide we have to pay the freight required to move off one of these deals. I'd suspect that we're sort of in for, a summer of relative stasis, maybe a depth add or 2, some PTO news, a Höglander deal at some point, And then, as we get into training camp closer to the waiver deadline, once Myers' bonus is paid, then I wouldn't be shocked at all to see a little bit of movement, particularly given how we saw them manage training camp last year, where, of course, they made a trade for Riley Stillman, sent out a second to get off Dickinson. So they made a cap-clearing move and a move to acquire, a mid-20s defender right before camp opened. I wouldn't be shocked by something like that. But a July or August mega move, I'm not going to be holding my breath as I enjoy my summer vacation.
Alain Vigneault, 62 years old, says that's it for coaching for him. Still getting paid by the Philadelphia Flyers. What comes to mind when you think of Alain Vigneault and his time with the Canucks, Thomas?
What comes to mind to me, Donnie, to be totally honest with you, is the way that Vigneault zone matched, right? The set plays, the efficiency that the team had going in terms of how they converted offensive zone draws into goals. Their usage of the Twins was obviously key to that, but also the way they loaded up in terms of using the Twins. I think to sort of capture it in one big picture word, what I'll remember about Alain Vigneault in Vancouver was the alignment, right? There was an alignment between him and management, a collaborative approach to winning and maximizing every edge possible. And that required Vigneault to, accept some newfangled ideas in terms of both attacking hockey. We know how negative he was as a coach when he first came here. But it also required him to put up with, sleep doctors advising on his team's travel schedule and, zone matching in a way that we'd seen coaches do to some extent, but not nearly to the extreme that Alain Vigneault and the Vancouver Canucks did during sort of a golden era for this franchise. I think there was an alignment between Vigneault and management at the time, and that sort of makes Vigneault the face in some ways. Not the star player, not the marquee name, but he was in some ways the face of the most successful era in Vancouver Canucks history. And I think that's how he'll be remembered and how he should be remembered in this market, for the wins and for the alignment that helped produce them.
Yeah, you make a good point about that year he won the Adams. It was all about defense, all about defense. They get some more offensive talent under Mike Gillis. He had to adjust. What's happening in the summer for Thomas Drance?
Well, I'm going to finish out the week at Canucks Talk over on 650, and then I am off both from the Athletic and off of radio for 3 weeks. In a long, long time. So I will be at the beach. I will be at the local breweries. I will be with my dog in various scenic parts of Vancouver and the province of British Columbia. And then August, I'll be back and working, but taking every long weekend to attend a wedding. As one does at this time of year, and then getting ready to gear back up, boys. We've got Penticton Young Stars. That's not very far away, and the NHL season, like the Canucks season, starts in 98 days. We're 98 days from puck drop on the Oilers Canucks at Rogers Arena, October 11th. So it's going to zoom by. I'm going to enjoy it, but I'm also already antsy to watch hockey again next year.
Well, we know about October 11th. That's our first day back, Thomas.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, a month before that. And a bit.
Something tells me that's not true.
We appreciate you every Friday, Thomas. We appreciate you every day, but especially on Fridays, and in this case, Thursday. Thanks so much, my friend.
Well, you guys make it easy. It's a ton of fun. I'm honestly honored to be involved. So thanks for having me. And we'll do it again next year, boys. Lots of hot takes. Lots of angry YouTube comments. Let's go.
Beautiful. Love it.
Let's go.
Thomas Drance, The Athletic. Have a great summer.